Hey guys, Kelade here. So early this week, Blizzard put out their current changes that they're going to make to both Arms and Fury Warrior and a little bit of prot for the Shadowlands Alpha. So let's kind of take a look at that today. Right off the top, they're kind of talking about some of the talents and some of the changes that I think they made in the Alpha that I think I'm not even aware of because I don't have the Alpha. So Blizzard, if you guys want to throw the Alpha my way, let me know. And then as far as for, I think the biggest thing for Arms is that they're changing their mastery for deep wounds. It's not going to be exactly the same. The deep wounds actual effect is going to do less damage. Now, they heard that people give them feedback that the overwhelming contribution to the damage breakdown felt unrewarding. And it is the case. I mean, when you look at the Arms Warrior breakdown for their damage, I mean, deep wounds is super high at the top. And obviously, the deep wound damage itself, you're not like physically pressing anything, though you are hitting Mortal Strike and Executes to proc the bleed. But I think there's more than just that. I don't think this is the pure point that people think is unrewarding. I think stuff like corruption damage, essence damage, Azerite trait damage, all of that combined is kind of what makes it unrewarding, right? You have so many things that are just proc based from auto attacks. On top of that, those procs can proc other procs. So I think that's a bigger issue. Obviously, as we go to an expansion and we lose some of those things, like we're going to lose our corruption, we're going to lose our necks, we're probably going to lose our Azerite gear. I don't know exactly what the gear format in the new expansion is going to look like, but I think that'll take care of that. But essentially, they've also made it so their mastery works very, very similarly to the Fury Warrior mastery, except theirs is more debuff based, right? So you need the deep wounds on some target. It's going to give you a scaling damage increase based on how much mastery you have. So the more mastery you have, the more damage you deal to a target when it has deep wounds on them. And that also increases from 6 seconds to 12 seconds, which also means you have to use Mortal Strike again in execute phase, and I think they wanted to do that, which I think is fine, but just know that probably every 12 seconds in execute phase now while you're playing with Arms, you're going to have to hit a Mortal Strike so you can apply the deep wounds effect, so that way the mob takes more damage. The other thing that they've finally brought back is single-minded fury. I think this is just to alleviate a vocal group that really wants single-minded fury. I personally don't really care for it. I mean, my biggest reasoning for playing warrior so I can play fury and do wield two big two-handers, but I think some people might really like that, so that will be implemented. We'll see how the balancing works. Now, as far as for my expectations for single-minded fury versus Titan's Grip, I think a lot of it, if the balancing is correct, like if single-minded fury does the same as Titan's Grip, it'll come down to the actual weapons that are going to be in the game. If there's going to be some crazy weapon procs, some good examples would be the agility weapons that are currently in the game, right? Like Diver's Folly, if there's a weapon like that, if there's a weapon like the Lashers from Raw Den, right? Something where there's an effect on the weapon that you either need a one-hander or two-hander to get, I think that will also impact this. But we'll have to see when the actual loot comes out for the next expansion. For prot, I don't really care about prot. It's basically just Unstoppable Force. They're kind of like tuning it, but they want to make sure it's not too strong. I mean, yes, I think we've all known that Prot Warriors does way more damage before all the corruption stuff versus all the other tanks. They probably need to watch out for that a little bit so to make sure that your tanks isn't out DPSing your DPS in a dungeon setting. All right, so this is the mastery stuff that we talked about, right? They're making it so you can't apply deep wounds as execute anymore. That's why you have to now use Mortal Strike. It's whatever. But they are buffing the damage execute slightly. Now, this is across all specs. So the modifier changes slightly. I think if you come over here and you look at the actual, like, this is the alpha build. So like this is the Blizzard post, and this is like what's actually changed. You can see that the execute attack power ratio has gone up a little bit. And they do mention it in the post too. Right here, yeah. Execute increased by 20%. Mortal Strike reduced by 5%. I actually don't know why they're reducing it by 5%, but fine, I guess. Ravager has been redesigned to give it more identity and differentiate from Bladestorm. I think the most interesting thing about Ravager now is now it chases nearby enemies. So if you just drop it on the ground and mobs get moved out of it, it's not the worst. We'll have to see how fast they can actually chase enemies, but if it can actually like stay on the mob that you're trying to hit, it could be better than it was. Collateral damage has been redesigned. I think this is kind of a bait. Now, as you and I know it, which is collateral damage in the current live version of the game in BFA, it's going back to that. I think earlier on in Alpha, before they made this change, they actually changed Sweeping Strikes significantly. Before it was, they changed to this, like when Sweeping Strikes ends, your next roll win deals 25% increased damage for each ability used during Sweeping Strikes that damage a second target. I mean, it's kind of confusing. It's kind of essentially how Test of Might now works. You basically have to use an ability, stack up a bunch of your whatever you're doing, right? In test and might situation, you have to spend a lot of rage. In this situation, you have to hit a lot of different targets or use a lot of different abilities. And then at the end of it, you can get a big payoff, right? Problem is, in a lot of AoE situations, you don't have that much time. Like, if you look in the current raid, ads don't really live for more than 10 seconds, right? You have everybody just blasting it nowadays, right? The ads come out, they die within like 5 seconds. Similarly for Mythic Plus, like unless you're pushing really, really high keys, like people are blasting through ads very, very, very quickly. So for things like this to have like long payoffs, it doesn't work out as well as you would think. So I guess they're just scrapping the idea and going back to what Sweeping Strikes currently does, except now they refund 30% of the rage cost, which is actually slightly higher than what it is right now in live. All right, so they're basically just doing like a 180 or a 360, I guess, because they're going back to what it is right now. Cleave has been redesigned. I think the Cleave one is slightly interesting. We'll get to the other thing in a second. So right now, obviously with all the damage targets, it has hit arms too. Cleave now only cleaves 5 enemies in front of you for physical damage, so no longer like just unlimited everybody. It also inflicts mass rate deep wounds, which is pretty good because it's basically Warbreaker, right? You can use Warbreaker and hopefully this, and you're just getting a lot of extra increased damage, right? And then also it will consume your overpower effect to deal increased damage. Right now, overpower only increases your mortal strike, right? In Shadowlands, it seems that it will affect both your cleave and mortal strike depending on which ability you use it first. And then cleave is going to be on a 6-second cooldown. But the one big thing I do want to know for cleave is right now in live, there's a 3 target minimum for cleave in order for it to apply deep wounds, right? Now that doesn't seem to be the case in Shadowlands. If we look at cleave right here, I'm kind of hover over it. So on the left side is the old build and on the right side is the new build. There's nothing in the tooltip right now that says you need to hit at least 3 targets to apply deep wounds. I don't know if that's actually going to be the case. I would love to be able to test it, but we'll have to see when we actually all get access. So if that's a change, it obviously makes cleave slightly better because now you can use it for 2 target cleave, as opposed to just 3 to 5, I guess, in this situation. So those are kind of the big changes I think for arms right now. Is just biggest thing is just their mastery and some of their AoE stuff. And of course, having to hit Mortal Strike and execute phase. For Fury Warriors, single Mana Fury is back. You actually get it pretty early. You do get an 8% damage increase and you get a 5% movement speed increase. I don't know if that can actually compete with Titan's Grip right now. I feel like that needs a little bit more balancing. I mean, I feel like if you just look at the damage of the one-handers and the two-handers, I don't think that's enough, but we'll have to see. So the other thing is Reckless now generates 40 rage. Great. I think one of the reasons why they're giving baseline Reckless more rage is that they're going to change Reckless Abandon. We'll see that in a second, but great. Now when you hit Reckless, you get 40 rage, so when you Wreck Charge, you're basically at 88 rage right away. The following talents have been removed. Inner Rage, Fierce Lash for Battle, or Wrecking Ball. It's actually pretty funny because some of these talents were added specifically for Shadowlands, and I guess they just decided that they didn't want them anymore. Frenzy is a new talent. Rampage increases your haste by 3% for 12 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. This effect is reset if you rampage at a different primary target. Essentially, on a single target, you're going to pick this, right? There's no way you don't pick this. You can get 3% haste that stacks 3 times, so 9% haste. In a single target fight, you'll never not rampage within 12 seconds, so it's actually a huge amount of haste that you're getting, right? I mean, this is like Furious Slash nerf levels of haste, right? So yeah, I mean, this seems very, very strong right now, at least for a pure single target. Even for AoE, as long as you can keep your primary target the same primary target, like let's say you have a boss and it just spawns some ads around it, as long as you keep targeting the boss when you rampage, it's still pretty good. You still get to keep the buff. Seath is a new talent. Bloodthirst generates 2 more rage or 4 more rage when it critically strikes from your primary target. Sure. The only problem with this right now, I think early on in the expansion, your secondary stats generally is not going to be as high as you are at the end of expansion. I mean, if you look at people's stats right now, especially with all the corruption shit that's going on, you're hitting 60% crit non-buffed, and once you use all your buffs, you're at 100% crit, right? Same thing with mastery and haste, all of that stuff. So this could be stronger later on expansion, but anything that requires you to critically strike, I feel like at the beginning of expansions isn't going to be as strong as it can be by the end. So I'm still worried on how strong this talent actually is. Cruelty is a new talent. While enraged, Raging Blow deals 20% more damage and has a 30% chance to instantly reset its cooldown. Obviously, if you pick this, you're just going to use Raging Blow priority over Bloodthirst while you're enraged again, especially because there's no more going to be any Cold Steel Hot Bloods. I definitely think you probably will pick this And we'll get to synergies about the talents for Fury in a bit. Frothing Berserker updated. Rampage has a 20% chance to immediately refund 40 rage. This doesn't really look that good. We'll have to see in the talent section if this actually gives you the buff, because if it doesn't give you a buff, it looks pretty garbage. Meat Cleaver is back. I thought they brought it back already, but Whirlwind deals 30% more damage and now affects your next 4 single target melee attacks instead of the next 2 attacks. I feel like this talent is a bit weird because they're buffing one aspect that they're making Whirlwind do more damage. But if you pick this talent, you also don't have to hit Whirlwind as much, right? Because you can now cleave 4 more attacks. So the actual talent seems like it works against itself, right? You're buffing something, but then you're also making it so you don't have to hit that thing as much. And I don't think it can compete with Dragon Roar, which we'll get into in a sec. Onslaught. Brutally attack an enemy for whatever attack physical damage inquires in rage. This was out earlier, but they just made the rage generate 15 instead of 10. Maybe they thought it wasn't doing enough damage. I mean, I think for this ability, they should just make it do more damage as opposed to like the actual rage generation aspect of it. Because one, it's a 12-second cooldown. You can only use it during rage, and you get the talent into it, right? So I feel like this thing should just like absolutely slam in how much damage it does. Next, we have kind of slightly changed Dragon Roar. The cooldown reduced from 30 seconds from 35, which great. Thank God they're doing that. And now it lines up better with all of your cooldowns as a Fury Warrior, right? Because every cooldown you have is at like 30 second, 1 minute, or a minute and a half increments, right? This will make it actually line up with everything else. No longer reduces enemy movement speed. It's a little bit feels bad. But it now critically strikes for 3 times normal damage, which actually pretty good. So now Dragon Roar, especially in the AoE setting, don't tell anybody, but there is currently no target cap on Dragon Roar. So yeah, that's a very, very strong ability going into the next expansion, right? Any AoE ability that doesn't have a target cap is going to be pretty strong, especially if this thing critical hits for 3 times normal damage. So if let's say a normal hit hits 100 damage, you know, currently a WoW crits for 200, right? I guess in this situation, it would now crit for 300. So that's pretty good. Blazing Storm damage increased by 20%. Yeah, but does it hit all targets? No. Blazing Storm only hits 8 targets, and it doesn't critically strike for 300% normal damage. So we'll see about that. Reckless Abandon updated. We kind of mentioned this earlier. Reckless now generates 20 more rage and greatly empowers Bloodthirst and Raging Blow. This is the big thing, right? So I don't know if you guys have seen, but in Shadowlands, Demon Hunters is getting a Mortal Strike effect, right? They're going to get a thing in their PvP talents where they can, once they apply, I forget what ability, but it applies a 25% healing debuff. So I think to compensate, Blizzard decided to give essentially Metamorphosis to Fury Warriors, right? I think it's going to work very similarly where, you know, when a Demon Hunter uses meta, their 2 main abilities gets like the improved version. That's essentially what's going to happen here, right? Bloodthirst becomes Bloodbath, dealing 100% more damage and on 3-second cooldown. Raging Blow becomes Crushing Blow, deals 100% more damage, and it charges to your target within 10 yards. Now, first things first, it is possible to have 2 charges of Raging Blow, right? And every time you hit it, you're going to like a mini charge to your target. Just for some like measurements right now, there's that PvP talent where if you have execute, you can charge with somebody within 15 yards. So this is 10. So kind of like some measurement how far somebody is. 10 yards is also kind of like in that perfect range where you can almost melee them, but you can't like charge them, right? It's perfectly in that mid range where you like can't melee, but you can't charge. So this is actually pretty useful, especially in PvP, to just be able to stay on a target, especially with all the different ways that you can reset Raging Blow. Just inherently, it has a chance, right, 20% there to reset its own cooldown. And then, of course, you can go into the talent that we talked about earlier, Cruelty, which gives another 30% chance to reset its cooldown. So I'm pretty sure those just add up, those 50% chance to reset your cooldown once you pick that talent. I actually think these two talents are going to work pretty well together if you take Reckless Abandon and Cruelty, and your Raging Blow / Crushing Blow is going to do a lot of damage. Next, we have 4 extra changes for Prot Warrior. I mean, actually not really. Ravager's change is kind of like across the board between arms and Prot. It's the exact same thing. Dragon Roar is actually changed just because of Fury's being changed. That's the same thing. So realistically, there's only 2 changes for Prot. Crackling Thunder reduces movement speed of Thunderclap by, now increases it by 10%. Okay, sure. Ignore Pain now caps at 2x value. Was a cap at 1.3. Okay, great. I mean, that actually seems like a pretty big change, like percentage wise, right? From a 1.3 to a 2x, but whatever, it's Prot. So this is all like the DPS stuff. I mean, some of it I want to say looks good. I would say Fury changes actually look much better than the arms changes. I mean, just looking at this, you know, arms is going to be like, okay, just keep your devos up, your mono strike, your deep wounds, right? And then you want to get your class of smash and then hit your damaging abilities, which coincidentally are the stuff that applies to debuffs anyway. So it's kind of still like a no-brainer in kind of what you want to do as arms. And then, you know, Fury, I feel like has a bit more new tools coming to expansion. Like there's actually new things to play with. Just looking at both specs, I feel like if you want to play both and you don't really mind, like you should be way more excited for what Fury is going to bring in the next expansion. And then we can take a look at the talents really quickly. So here is the talent tree from Wowhead, right? So you got War Machine, Sudden Death, Fresh Meat. I mean, I'm pretty confident you just take Sudden Death here. Like I don't think there's any contention. So we're just gonna talk about single target, right? Let's not worry about AA right now, right? Next row of talents, it doesn't really matter. I mean, double time, Pentameric, Storm Bolt, exactly the same as live. So in a race setting, a single target, you just go double time because you can't really stun the bosses, right? Now this one is interesting, level 30 talent. So I think the reason why they had to buff Onslaught is because it has to compete with Frenzy, but I don't think Onslaught, unless it does insane damage, can compete right now, right? 9% haste, basically for free, is insanely strong. So I think you just go with Frenzy for now. I know Massacre is there, but you know, unless Blizzard adds a mechanic back to Fury like Juggernaut, which I heavily recommend, like Blizzard, if you guys are watching this, give Juggernaut back to Fury in some way, shape, or form. So Juggernaut was of course like mechanic that we had in Legion, where every time you executed, the next execute, you know, stacking does more and more damage. I actually think that's a crazy good identity for Fury Warriors to just like go ham and execute phase and have that be stronger and stronger and ramping up. Loved it in Legion, and if it can come back in some way, shape, or form for Shadowlands, would be great. I mean, just make that the Massacre talent, to be honest. All right, level 35 talent row. This doesn't increase your DPS, but let's just say there's no movement. Just take Warpaint for like 10% free damage reduction. So level 40 is kind of interesting because you have the new talents, two new talents here. Actually three, because Frothing Berserker changed, right? So Steed, which is the Bloodthirst crit one. Frothing Berserker, see, as we look at the talent here, there's no buff anymore, right? Frothing Berserker on live gives you a haste and damage buff. So I think to lose that and then only get a 20% chance to also only refund 40 rage, that looks really weak. So I'm gonna guess Frothing Berserker is not gonna be taken here. I think Cruelty, you just do that, to be honest. Like that looks very strong, right? 20% more damage, 30% chance to reset its own cooldown. And just remember, there's no more Cold Steel Hot Blood in the next expansion. So that means the priority of Rage and Blow probably goes up more, and it probably has higher priority than Bloodthirst when you're actually enraged, right? Because Rage and Blow does more damage and it generates more rage. And then the level 45 talents, right? If you're doing single target, it's still the same now as in Shadowlands. You just pick Dragon Roar, right? It does the most damage. And now Dragon Roar does more damage, so great on a shorter cooldown. Here, 50, you got Anger Management. I don't think that's been changed at all. Reckless Abandon, this is the one that's been changed. And then Siegebreaker is the same. So I would say right now, I mean, they're pretty even. Even on live, Anger Management isn't that different from Siegebreaker. But I think Reckless Abandon, you gotta go for it, right? Reckless now just generates 20 more rage. Okay, that's whatever. But it's the whole thing about greatly empowers Bloodthirst and Radiant Blow. Now, the 20 rage is actually significant because if you press Rec, right, because now it gives you default 40, with the 20 more, that's 60. You charge the target, I mean, you're full rage already, right? And then you can just start with a Rampage on first GCD. So this is actually pretty big. And it's basically the same as what is now, with the exception of extra duration, but it makes you so much stronger during a Rec, which I think is great. I think that's one of the things that Fury feels like it's lacking, is that even when I pop cooldowns at the beginning of fights, I don't feel strong, right? I can't compete with, you know, obviously Fire Mage is the worst example, but with their combust, like my damage is nowhere to be seen, even when I opening burst. The only way it's seen is if I get a random corruption proc and it just like boosts my damage, right? But as my own kit, in my cooldown right now, it doesn't seem as strong, and I hope that this will really kind of alleviate that when we actually pop our cooldowns, that it actually means something. So yeah, that's kind of the Shadowlands, you know, arms and warrior stuff. I mean, the arms talents, I don't think we need to look at that too much. There's not as much changes there, I feel like, as Fury, but Fury, I feel like this is a pretty good, like, obviously I haven't been on the alpha, I haven't tested anything, but just from looking at the talents, this looks like a pretty good single target talent build. Hopefully more things will change. Hopefully we get Juggernaut in some way, shape, or form. And yeah, that's it for Shadowlands. Now, I did want to give you guys a quick tip because I feel like people have been, you know, asking me either on stream or on the comment section about what they should do in regards to, you know, corruption stuff. Now, we did have a corruption video where we went over all of the best in slot stuff, but I think this part might actually help you guys. So if you go to your game, right, and let's assume you have Simulation Craft add-on downloaded. So just to go into it, if you go to your add-ons, right, there's an add-on called Simulation Craft, which all it does is once you download it, you just type /SIMC, so SimC. It'll give you this copy and paste. All you do is you copy this, right? You open up a site like RaidBots, right? You go to Top Gear, for example, and you paste all of that string in here, and it'll obviously give you all of your gear to sim, right? And this is what you want to be simming. And as far as our corruption, you want to go to this section, you know, select a relevant one. So let's say you want to test out, okay, I want to test out gushing, I want to test out severe, and I want to test out strike through, right? Like, you know, you told me that this was the best combination, but for my gear, what is actually the best combination, right? So you pick this, and then you pick out how many gear you want these to be on. Obviously, the max right now is 9 if you're dual wielding like us, so you can hit that. But the other key is, so your gear currently, if it has corruption on, what do you do? Well, it's very, very simple actually. So let's say what am I wearing right now? Why do I have no corruption on? Whatever. Well, let's say these pants, right? Now you're gonna do this for every piece of gear that you have, but these pants, these 475 pants that you're wearing currently has a severe 3, right? So my suggestion is, if you're doing what I suggest you do, where you like sim all the different corruption, you actually need to remove the corruption from your gear. Right now, with the way that RaidBots works out, it's easiest if you manually remove it. So when you go to your SimC add-on, right? So this top section says information about your character, right? Great. I know it's black color on gray background. It's kind of hard to see, but when you get to this section, there's that. So the first section where it starts listing out your head, neck, shoulders, this is the gear that you're actually wearing, right? And then below that, you can see gear from bags. All the stuff below here, this is the gear you have in your bags, right? But we're just doing corruption here. So what you want to do is you want to find the slot you're looking for, so legs, right? So your ID is what the item ID is, that's fine. Gem ID is there's a gem in it, that's fine. But what you want to do is you want to select all the bonus ID, all of this stuff in context. Take all of this, just delete it, right? You want to type eye level equals whatever eye level of your piece is. So if your piece is originally a 475, you just put a 475, right? What this does is that it strips all of the bonus stuff you have in your gear and just goes, you know, here's the pants, I have a gem in there, and here's my eye level. Obviously, if you don't have a gem, just delete the gem part, or it won't even show up. So it would just be ID and then eye level. But the key is now when you look at the piece, there's going to be no corruption on it, right? So then you can put on all the corruption. It just makes it easier for RaidBots. I know that this is something that like it's not super clear for people, so hopefully this helps. And obviously for max corruption here, you want to put on 59 generally. I don't know why it's on 39, but yeah, hopefully this, I think it's on default because I opened incognito. But yeah, hopefully that really helps you guys in simming out what corruption you want to do. Just do that for all of your pieces that you have currently on, and then pick all the corruption you want and then sim that way. It's going to give you a much cleaner sim that's not going to have any errors with it. But yeah, hopefully that was some good insight into kind of my opinions on the Shadowlands Arms and Warrior changes. And as always, thanks for checking out the video, guys. Feel free to subscribe to see more. See ya.